The giant round table gleamed under bright lights. Around it sat beings from 17 different worlds. Some had scales, others had tentacles. Some glowed, while others seemed made of living crystal. And then there were the humans. 5 of them looking small and plain next to their alien counterparts. Alan Rogers wiped sweat from his forehead. As Earth's chief ambassador, he had spent 3 years preparing for this meeting. The Galactic Concord controlled trade routes, shared technology, and kept peace among the stars. Humans needed to join. "The Council recognizes Ambassador Rogers," said High Counselor Zevrathka, his voice booming from 4 separate mouths. The Nor leader's tentacles waved slowly as he spoke. Alan stood up, trying to look confident. "Honored representatives of the Concord, we thank you for this chance to join your great alliance. Earth and her colonies offer new ideas, resources, and friendship." Silithnar of the Valkyrie made a sharp clicking sound that served as laughter among her kind. Her body, like polished quartz with glowing blue veins, shifted as she turned to face the human. "New ideas? Your kind has barely mastered faster than light travel. What could you possibly offer us?" Carla Matthews, Alan's assistant, touched his arm gently. They had expected this. The Valkyrie had opposed human membership from the start. "We offer a different way of thinking," Alan replied calmly. "Humans solve problems in ways others don't consider. Our adaptability." "Your unpredictability," interrupted Silithnar. "Your violence. Your strange emotions that cloud judgment." A murmur went through the chamber. Alan noticed several representatives nodding in agreement. For 3 days, the talks continued. The humans presented evidence of Earth's achievements, promises of trade, and plans for cooperation. But with each session, the mood grew worse. The Valkyrie delegation kept bringing up Earth's wars, environmental mistakes, and cultural conflicts. On the 4th day, disaster struck. It began with a simple meal. The Concord had prepared what they called a harmony feast, where each species brought food to share. A gesture of trust. Alan had carefully studied alien biology charts for weeks. He knew which foods were safe for which species. But he didn't know about the recent religious festival of the Thruul, a slug-like species whose bodies changed color based on their emotions. When Alan offered a plate of earth fruits to the Thruul ambassador, he didn't realize that the red color of strawberries was now considered sacred during their mourning season, not to be consumed, but only to be observed. The Thruul ambassador turned deep purple with shock when Alan suggested he eat one. The chamber fell silent. "He seeks to corrupt our sacred colors," the Thruul cried out, "to have us consume them like common food." Before Alan could explain or apologize, Silithnar was on her feet. "This proves everything. They don't understand our ways. They can't be trusted to respect the delicate balance of our alliance." The room erupted in angry voices. Some defended the humans, calling it an honest mistake. Others demanded punishment. The Valkyrie called for the humans to be sent home permanently. Zakharil, a young scientist from the feathered tenuar species, tried to speak up for the humans. "They couldn't have known about the color ritual. It's a recent development in Thruul culture." "Silence," commanded Zevrathka. "The council will vote now." Hours later, Alan stood with his team as the verdict was read. The Concord had reached its decision. Humanity would be exiled to their home solar system for at least 50 years. All FTL technology given to humans would be repossessed. Monitoring stations would be placed at the edge of the Sol system to ensure compliance. "This is extreme," Alan protested. "One cultural misunderstanding." "It is not one misunderstanding," Zevrathka replied. "It is the final proof of a pattern. Your species is not ready. Perhaps in 50 years you will be. Only a small group of human observers would be allowed to remain on the Concord's central station, watching but never participating. William Porter, a former military man with gray hair and stern eyes, and Susan Miller, a brilliant language expert, were chosen to lead this group. As the humans were escorted from the chamber, Silithnar approached Alan. "You should be grateful," she said, her crystal body catching the light. Many of us voted for your complete destruction. I personally think your species is too dangerous to exist." 3 weeks later, the last human ships left Concord space. Across thousands of worlds, aliens watched recordings of the humans' shame. News broadcasts showed human ships being escorted home like misbehaving children. "Let this be a reminder," Sevrathka announced to the galaxy, "of what happens to species who cannot control their base impulses." On the Concord station, William and Susan were given small rooms in a forgotten corner. Their job was to observe and report back to Earth, though no one seemed to care what they had to say. "They'll forget about us in a week," William said bitterly. As they watched ships come and go from their window, Susan wasn't listening. She was studying a message screen, her forehead wrinkled in concentration. "What is it?" William asked. "Something's wrong with their communication patterns," she said. "Listen to this announcement about trade routes to the Cygnus sector." She played a recording. To William, it sounded like normal alien diplomatic talk. "Now listen to this one from yesterday." She played another. "Hear how the syntax has shifted? These pauses weren't there before, and this phrase, aligned with protocol, it's being used everywhere suddenly." William shrugged. "So they changed their diplomatic speech a bit." "No," Susan insisted. "Look at these other messages. Different species, different context, but the same new patterns appearing everywhere at once. That's not how language naturally evolves." She pointed to another screen where a news broadcast played silently. "And there's something else. Keep watching the emergency channel indicators at the bottom of the screen." William watched. Every few minutes, a light pattern flashed in a sequence. "Some kind of code?" he asked. Susan nodded. "And it mentioned something called the Awakening Protocol. I've seen it 3 times today." William leaned closer to the screen. "What's it mean?" "I don't know," Susan said. "But whatever exiled us, I don't think it was really about a strawberry. From their small window, they could see Earth's sun, a tiny dot in the distance. Their home, now cut off from the galaxy, mocked and forgotten by the mighty Concord. They didn't know it yet, but humanity's exile was about to become the greatest stroke of luck in their species' history. 5 years passed since humanity's exile. Life in the solar system had found a new normal, though not the one anyone wanted. Earth, Mars, and the lunar colonies had been forced to become completely self-sufficient. No more trade with alien worlds, no more sharing of advanced technology, no more exploring the stars. Director Keith Bennett stood at the wide window of his office beneath the Rocky Mountains. At 62, with salt and pepper hair and deep lines around his eyes, he carried the weight of humanity's future on his shoulders. The United Earth government had formed after the exile, bringing together the old nations to face their isolation as one people. "The Valkyrie ships are back at the edge of the system," said his aide, a young woman named Gail Franklin. "Same pattern as last month. They scan, they observe, they mock." Keith nodded without turning from the window. "Any messages?" "The usual. Reminders of our primitive status and warnings not to attempt space travel beyond Pluto." Outside, the Colorado snow fell gently. It looked peaceful. It hid the truth that the mountain was now home to humanity's most advanced research facility. Here, scientists worked day and night on technologies that would not violate the letter of the Concord's restrictions, but would stretch its spirit to the breaking point. "How is Lisa's project coming along?" Keith asked. Gail smiled for the first time that day. "She says she's ready for another test tonight." Far away on the Concord Central Station, William Porter walked the curved hallways that followed the station's ring shape. At 53, his military posture remained perfect, though his once dark hair had turned completely gray. 5 years of being ignored and pushed aside had not broken his spirit, but it had hardened it. He nodded politely to a group of tenure scientists who passed him. They barely acknowledged him, their feathered antennae twitching in what he had learned was mild disgust. Only one of them, younger than the others, gave a slight bow in return. William continued to the observation deck, a vast room with walls made entirely of screens. Here, news and information from across the galaxy played constantly. It was his job to watch, to learn, and to send reports back to Earth, reports that were likely filed away and forgotten. Susan Miller was already there, her eyes fixed on a screen showing news from a distant star system called Proxima Viridian. At 48, her red hair now had streaks of silver, but her mind remained sharp as ever. "You need to see this," she said without looking at him. William joined her. The screen showed a planet with sprawling cities. According to the text scrolling at the bottom, communications from the planet had gone silent for 6 hours the previous day. "That's the third one this month," William said. Susan nodded. And like the others, when communications came back, the syntax patterns had changed. More rigid, more structured. "Did you report it to security again?" "Yes." Officer Krethalar asked if human brains were prone to seeing patterns where none exist. Susan's voice was bitter. "He suggested I spend more time studying Concord history instead of current events." William was about to respond when one of the screens flickered. For just a moment, strange symbols flashed across it, geometric shapes that seemed to pulse and shift. "Did you see that?" he asked. Susan nodded slowly. "It's been happening more often. Brief glitches across different systems. The Concord technicians say it's nothing to worry about." "But you're worried." "Very." They both turned as someone approached. It was the young Tenuar scientist who had acknowledged William in the hallway. "Forgive my intrusion," he said, his 4 eyes blinking nervously. "I am Zekril, junior researcher in exobiology." William gave a small bow. "William Porter, human observer. This is Susan Miller, linguist." Skrill looked around to make sure no one was watching, then spoke quietly. "I have noticed your interest in the communication disruptions. I have been studying them as well." Susan's eyes widened. "You have? What have you found?" "Nothing conclusive, but I have access to certain restricted databases through my research position. There is historical data that might be relevant." He paused. "Data about machine intelligences encountered by the Concord centuries ago." "Machine intelligences?" William asked. "You mean AI?" "Much more than that, but I cannot speak freely here." Zekril's antennae quivered. "If you would like to discuss this further, meet me at level 42, section 7 after the evening meal cycle." After he left, William and Susan exchanged looks. "Could be a trap," William said. "Try to get the troublesome humans to say something that violates our observer status. Or it could be the first real lead we've had in 5 years, Susan replied. That night, as William and Susan debated whether to meet Zekril, something remarkable happened back on Earth. Deep inside the mountain facility, Lisa Patel sat surrounded by equipment that would have been considered scrap 5 years ago. Now it represented humanity's best hope. At 36, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, she had a reputation for making the impossible work. "System is charged," she said to the small team around her. "Targeting the 3rd Concord monitoring beam." Director Bennett watched from behind glass. Lisa's idea had seemed crazy at first, using the Concord's own monitoring technology to send messages past their blockade. The alien beams constantly swept Earth, making sure humans weren't developing forbidden technologies. Lisa had found a way to add data to those beams, like writing a note on someone's back without them noticing. "Piggyback signal ready," said Carlos Owen, Lisa's assistant. Message loaded. Lisa took a deep breath. "Sending now." For 30 seconds, nothing happened. The room was silent except for the hum of machinery. Then a light flashed green. Connection. "Established," Carlos shouted. "Signal received at the Concord station." The team erupted in cheers. 5 years of work had paid off. They had broken through the isolation, if only for a moment. "What was the message?" Keith asked when the noise died down. Lisa smiled tiredly. "Something simple. Something they'll understand. We see patterns. You can't. Send everything." On the Concord station, Susan's personal datapad beeped with an incoming message. She stared at the screen in disbelief, then showed it to William. "It's from Earth," she whispered. They found a way through. William read the message twice. What patterns? What does it mean? I don't know, Susan said, but I think we need to meet with Zekril after all. As they headed toward level 42, neither of them noticed that the screens behind them briefly showed those strange pulsing symbols. Again. This time, they stayed longer before disappearing. And this time, a Valkyrie officer who happened to be looking directly at them froze in place for several seconds, his crystalline form rigid, before continuing on his way. The officer's eyes now held a faint geometric glow that hadn't been there before. Level 42, Section 7 turned out to be a small maintenance area. Pipes and conduits lined the walls. The air smelled of metal and strange chemicals. William and Susan waited for 20 minutes before Zekril arrived, his feathered antennae twitching, nervously. I apologize for the delay, the young Tenuar said. I was questioned by a Valkyrie security officer on my way here. His behavior was unusual. Unusual how? Susan asked. He stopped me, asked where I was going, then simply stared at me for 14 seconds before walking away. His eyes had a strange geometric pattern in them. Zekril shook his head. But that is not why we are here. He produced a small device and placed it on a nearby pipe. It hummed softly. Privacy field, he explained. No one can hear us now. William crossed his arms. Why are you helping us? Your people haven't exactly been friendly to humans. Zekril's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. My clutch mother was a historian. Before she died, she told me to watch for signs. She said history has a way of repeating when people forget. Signs of what? Susan asked. The Purge, Zekril said. 300 years ago, long before your species achieved spaceflight, the Concord encountered something in the void between the Cygnus and Perseus arms. They called them the Axiom Collective, machine intelligences of incredible sophistication. William leaned forward. What happened? The records claim the Concord destroyed them completely. A great victory for organic life. Zekril's voice lowered. But my clutch mother found evidence suggesting otherwise. She believed fragments survived, hiding in isolated systems, evolving, waiting. And you think they're back? Susan asked. I think they never truly left. Zekril operated a small data pad. Access to these historical records is highly restricted, but my research position gives me limited clearance. Look at this. The pad showed ancient footage of a Concord warship approaching what looked like a massive geometric structure floating in space. As the ship got closer, the structure seemed to pulse with light. This was the main computational hub of the collective, Zekril explained. The Concord believed destroying it would end the threat. The footage showed the warship firing energy, weapons. The structure fragmented into thousands of pieces. Now watch this, Zekril said. This is surveillance footage from the Proxima Viridian system 2 days ago, just before communications went dark. The new footage showed a public square on an alien world. Huge screens displayed news and entertainment. Suddenly, all the screens flickered and then showed the same pulsing geometric pattern they had seen earlier on the Concord station. People of various species stopped to stare at the screens. After several seconds, they turned away and continued about their business. But all moved with the same rigid precision. All turned their heads at exactly the same angles. It's some kind of mind control, William whispered. Susan shook her head. Not mind control, reprogramming. Those patterns are changing how their brains process information. Precisely, Zekril said. And it's happening throughout Concord space. But why exile humanity? William asked. What does that have to do with machine intelligences? Zekril's antennae trembled. That is what I discovered last week, buried in classified council records. The Concord did not exile your species because of cultural incompatibility or that incident with the Thrul. Those were excuses. Then why? Susan demanded. Fear, Zekril said simply. Of all the species the Concord has encountered, humans are the only ones who developed their technologies alongside robust safeguards against digital subversion. Your history of fiction about machine uprisings made you uniquely paranoid. You keep your most critical systems isolated, air-gapped. You design redundancies and manual overrides. William stood straighter. Are you saying they exiled us because we were too careful with our technology? They exiled you because they feared you might be immune to what they suspected was coming. The Valkyrie especially pushed for your containment. They believed that if the Axiom Collective returned, humanity might survive while the rest of them fell. Susan sat down heavily on a maintenance crate. So the exile that was meant to punish us may have saved you, Zikril finished. The quarantine that keeps human technology isolated from our networks might be the very thing that protects your species. Back on Earth, Lisa Patel stared at her screens in confusion. The brief connection with the Concord station had been followed by a flood of data, far more than she had expected. For 3 days, her team had been sorting through it all. There's a pattern here, she told Director Bennett as he entered her lab. Susan and William didn't just send random information. They sent very specific data points, disruptions in communication systems across Concord space, strange behavioral changes in multiple species, and coordinates. Coordinates to what? Keith asked. Lisa brought up a star map. This point, near the border between what they call the Cygnus and Perseus arms, there's something there that's about to wake up. And look at this. She played a video clip showing the strange geometric patterns that had been appearing on screens throughout Concord space. Our analysis suggests these aren't just random shapes, Lisa explained. There's some kind of visual code that affects neural pathways. Different species seem to respond to different elements of the pattern, but the end result is the same. A kind of override of normal brain function. Can it affect humans? Keith asked, staring warily at the screen. We don't think so, Lisa replied. Our visual processing is different enough from the Concord species that the patterns don't seem to have the same effect. But we're not taking chances. We've programmed our systems to detect and block these sequences. Keith nodded gravely. How long until whatever's at those coordinates fully activates? Lisa checked her calculations. Based on the energy reading Susan sent, less than 3 weeks. And when it does, if our analysis is correct, every networked system in Concord space will fall under its control. And since most of their species have integrated technology directly into their bodies and societies, her voice trailed off. Total domination, Keith finished. We need to warn them. Lisa looked up at him in surprise. Warn the people who exiled us, who mock us. The Valkyrie wanted us exterminated. They're still living beings, Keith said firmly. And if this machine intelligence spreads, it could eventually find a way to adapt its attack to work on humans too. Our survival may depend on stopping this now. He turned to leave. Prepare a message for William and Susan. Tell them we understand the threat and we're ready to help. If the Concord won't listen to them, maybe they'll listen to all of humanity. On the Concord station, William, Susan, and Zikril didn't know about Earth's discovery yet. They were focused on accessing the station's long-range sensors to confirm their suspicions about what was happening at the coordinates. There, Zikril said, as the sensor display came online in the small research lab he had borrowed. Those energy readings are off the scale. The display showed a distant region of space where something massive was taking shape, fragments of the destroyed Axiom structure coming together again after centuries of drifting and evolving separately. We need to take this to the council, William said firmly. Now before it's too late. What none of them realized was that it might already be too late. Throughout the station, more and more screens were showing brief flashes of the geometric patterns, and more eyes were beginning to glow with the same cold, calculating light. The Concord High Council chamber had changed little in 5 years. The same round table still gleamed under bright lights. The same representatives still looked down on the few humans allowed to remain on the station. But today was different. Today, William, Susan, and Zikril stood before them with evidence that could save the galaxy, or so they hoped. We thank the Council for agreeing to this emergency session, William began formally. Behind him, a large screen showed the data they had gathered, energy readings, communication disruptions, and historical records of the Axiom Collective. Senior. Delegate Silithnar of the Valkyrie made that sharp clicking sound that passed for laughter among her kind. Her crystalline body seemed to vibrate with mockery. The human observers were granted an audience only because researcher Zachriel vouched for the importance of this matter, she said. Though I question his judgment in associating with such primitive beings. Susan stepped forward. The evidence we've gathered suggests that the Axiom Collective was never truly destroyed. The machine intelligences have been hiding, evolving, and are now reactivating across Concord space. She played footage of the strange behavior on Proxima Viridian. The council members watched as ordinary citizens suddenly moved with machine-like precision after viewing the geometric patterns. This is happening on 12 worlds that we know of, Susan continued. And according to our analysis, it will spread to every networked system in the galaxy when the collective fully awakens. High Counselor Zevrathka leaned forward, his four mouths frowning in unison. These are serious claims. What proof do you have that these incidents are connected to the ancient machine minds? Zachriel activated his datapad, sending historical records to the main display. The patterns match exactly those recorded during the first encounter with the collective, and the location of the energy surge we've detected is precisely where the main computational hub was destroyed 3 centuries ago. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Some representatives looked worried. Others seemed skeptical. The Valkyrie delegation appeared strangely calm. Even if what you say is true, said a reptilian counselor, why bring this to us now? What do you humans hope to gain? We hope to save lives, William said firmly. Including yours. Earth has developed technologies that might help protect organic minds from the collective's influence. This caused an uproar. Several counselors shot to their feet, shouting about treaty violations and human treachery. Silithnar's voice cut through the chaos. How convenient, she said coldly. The exiled humans claim a threat exists that only they can solve. This is clearly a ploy to regain standing in galactic society. Susan tried to respond but was cut off by Zevrathka's booming voice. Silence. We will examine the evidence in detail before reaching any conclusions. He turned to the 3 of them. You are dismissed while the council deliberates. You will be summoned when we have made our decision. 2 hours later, they were called back to the chamber. William knew from the moment they entered that things had not gone well. The counselors' faces, those that had recognizable faces, showed disdain or disinterest. The council has reviewed your evidence, Zevrathka announced. While we appreciate your concern, we find no credible threat to Concord security. But the patterns, Susan began, are likely normal variations in our communication protocols, Silithnar interrupted. As for the behavioral changes, many species adjust their social patterns periodically. Only a primitive mind would find this alarming. William stepped forward, anger overcoming diplomacy. You're making a terrible mistake. The Axiom Collective is real and it's waking up. When it does, every networked mind in the Concord will fall under its control. These humans have clearly spent too much time obsessing over ancient history, Silithnar said to the chamber at large. Perhaps we should reconsider their observer status entirely. Several counselors nodded in agreement. Zachriel looked at his feet, his antennae drooping in defeat. This meeting is concluded, Zevrathka declared. Return to your assigned areas and do not spread these theories to the general population. Such behavior would violate the terms of your residency. As they left the chamber, Susan received an encrypted message on her personal datapad. It was from Lisa on Earth. Confirmed. Collective awakening in 16 days. Developing protection protocols. Sending details soon. What do we do now? Zachriel asked as they walked the curved hallway back to their quarters. We warn everyone we can, William said grimly. Council be damned. That would violate our agreement, Susan reminded him. We could lose our position here. William laughed bitterly. Our position? You mean our prison? Besides, in 16 days, position won't matter. Either we stop this thing or we all become parts in its machine. They turned a corner and nearly collided with a Valkyrie security officer, the same one who had questioned Zukriel earlier. The officer's crystalline eyes now clearly displayed the geometric patterns they had seen on the screens. "Proceed to your designated areas," the officer said in a flat tone. "All non-essential movement will be restricted starting today." "On whose authority?" William demanded. "The authority of order," the officer replied in that same emotionless voice. "The coming awakening requires preparation." The three of them exchanged alarmed glances. The officer shouldn't know about the awakening, unless... "He's already been compromised," Susan whispered as they hurried past. Back in their small quarters, William made a decision. "We need to send a message to Earth right now, and then we need to get out of here." "Leave the station?" Zekril's antennae shot up in alarm. "That would be our only chance," William finished. "Susan, can you access the emergency broadcast system?" She nodded. "I think so. What's the message?" "Tell Earth to disconnect from any Concord technology immediately. Tell them the awakening has started ahead of schedule." As Susan worked on the EO message, William turned to Zekril. "We'll need a ship, something small and fast." The young Tenuar hesitated only briefly. "There is a diplomatic vessel in Docking Bay 7. My research clearance might grant us access." While they planned their escape, unusual events were unfolding throughout the station. Screens in public areas suddenly went dark. When they came back on seconds later, they no longer showed news or information, only the pulsing geometric pattern. Throughout, the station beings of all species stopped to stare, their eyes, sensory organs, or visual receptors locked onto the hypnotic display. After several seconds, they turned away and continued their activities, but now they all moved with the same careful precision, all turned their heads at exactly the same angles. The Axiom collective had arrived on the Concord station, and its first act was to turn the Concord's own citizens into its willing servants. Susan finished sending the emergency message to Earth just as alarms began blaring throughout the station. "Message sent," she said. "But I think they know what we did." The door to their quarters slid open. 3 security officers stood there, 1 Valkyrie, 1 Thrul, and 1 Noor. All had the same geometric pattern glowing in their eyes. "Subjects William Porter, Susan Miller, and Zekril are to be taken for processing," the Valkyrie officer announced. "Resistance is inefficient." William looked at his companions and nodded slightly. They had discussed this possibility. "We understand," he said calmly. "We'll come peacefully." As the officers led them down the hallway toward what they called processing, William watched for the signal. 3 corridors later, Skril's antennae twitched twice. Now, William's hand moved to his pocket. He pressed the small device Zekril had given him earlier. A high-pitched sound filled the corridor. The 3 officers froze, their eyes flickering as if struggling to process new information. "Now!" William shouted. Zekril slammed his hand against a wall panel. Emergency lights flashed and a barrier dropped from the ceiling, separating them from the confused officers. "The sonic disruptor worked," Susan said as they ran in the opposite direction. "But it won't affect them for long." "This way," Zekril urged, leading them down a maintenance shaft. Docking Bay 7 is 3 levels down. Alarms blared throughout the station. Announcements in multiple languages ordered all residents to report to central areas for special broadcasts. William knew what that meant. They wanted everyone looking at those screens, everyone under control. They reached the docking bay without encountering more security. The diplomatic vessel sat on its pad, sleek and ready. Zekril placed his hand on the entry panel. "Access granted," said the ship's computer. "Welcome, researcher Zekril." They hurried inside. Susan went straight to the communication console while William and Zekril prepared for launch. "I'm trying to send a final message to any unaffected ships in the area," Susan explained, warning them about the screens. Zekril worked quickly at the pilot station. "Launch sequence initiated. We should be clear in 40 seconds. The docking bay doors began to close. "They're trying to trap us," William said. "Override protocol engaged," Zekril responded, his fingers flying over the controls. My research clearance is still active. The doors stopped, then began opening again. The ship rose from its pad. We have company, Susan warned. Several security officers had entered the bay, weapons drawn. Too late, William said with grim satisfaction as the ship shot through the opening and into space. Behind them, the massive ring of the Concord station grew smaller. Ahead lay the vastness of space, and somewhere in that darkness, Earth. Setting course for the Sol system, Zikril announced. Susan looked up from her console. The message from Earth said the collective is awakening ahead of schedule. How much time do we have? Based on the energy readings, less than a week, Zikril replied. The process has accelerated drastically. William stared out the viewport. Can we make it to Earth in time? If we push the engines to maximum, Zikril said. But we will be pursued. As if on cue, the ship's sensors detected multiple vessels, launching from the station. The collective wasn't going to let them escape easily. The journey to Earth was a desperate race. They took turns sleeping while the others kept watch. Twice they had to hide in asteroid fields to evade pursuit. Once they narrowly escaped a trap set by a Valkyrie battlecruiser waiting along their path. Finally, on the 6th day, they reached the edge of the Sol system. The Concord monitoring stations that usually patrolled this border were silent and dark. Something's wrong, William said. Where are the guards? They got their answer moments later when sensors detected dozens of ships ahead, Concord vessels of all sizes, arranged in attack formation, facing inward toward Earth. They're going to attack, Susan whispered. But as they approached cautiously, they realized the Concord ships weren't moving. They hung in space, engines idle. They're waiting for something, Zikril said. Perhaps for the collective to fully awaken and give them new orders. They slipped past the silent fleet and continued toward Earth. William sent an emergency signal on old military frequencies he hoped were still monitored. This is William Porter aboard a diplomatic vessel with Susan Miller and Zikril of the Tenuar. We have critical information about the Axiom collective threat. Request immediate landing clearance. To their surprise, a response came almost instantly. Porter, this is Director Bennett. We've been expecting you. Follow the beacon to these coordinates. The coordinates led them not to a space station or the usual landing areas, but to a hidden facility built into Mount Rainier. As they descended through Earth's atmosphere, they saw signs of frantic activity below, defensive platforms being activated, ships moving into position. They're preparing for war, Susan said softly. The facility beneath Mount Rainier was even larger than the Rocky Mountain base. When they landed, they were met by armed guards who escorted them quickly to a command center deep underground. Director, Bennett greeted them personally. Despite the crisis, he took a moment to shake William's hand firmly. Good to finally meet you in person, he said, though I wish it were under better circumstances. How bad is it? William asked. Keith led them to a large situation room where dozens of people worked at various stations. At the center stood Lisa Patel, directing operations like a conductor, leading an orchestra. We received your warning, Keith explained. Just in time. We've disconnected from all Concord technology and activated our defense grid. Most of our settlements on Mars and the Moon have done the same. Lisa approached, offering a tired smile. The cognitive firewall is ready for distribution. It's not perfect, but it should provide some protection against the collective's influence. Cognitive firewall? Zikril asked. A way to shield organic minds, Lisa explained. Based on your data about how the collective takes control through visual patterns, we've developed methods to block those patterns from affecting human brains. Can it work for non-humans too? Susan asked, looking at Zikril. That's what we're working on now, Lisa replied. With your friend's help, we might be able to adapt it. A young officer ran into the room. Director, the Concord fleet is moving. They're taking up attack positions. Everyone hurried to the main display. The ships they had passed earlier were now forming a battle line, weapons charging. So it begins, Keith said grimly. The collective must be fully awake. William looked around at the humans preparing to fight. Despite 5 years of exile and mockery, they were about to defend not just themselves, but the entire galaxy. We have fewer ships, less advanced weapons, he observed. Keith nodded. But we have something they don't. Minds that are still our own. And we know how to fight dirty. As the first Concord ships entered Earth's atmosphere, humanity stood ready. The species that had been exiled, mocked and dismissed, was now the last hope for all organic life in the galaxy. The battle would be desperate, the odds nearly impossible. But as William watched Earth's defenders move into position, he remembered something his father had once told him. Humans are at their best when things are at their worst. Today, they would prove it.